Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. They keep predicting the fall of Western civilization is coming. And indeed, we are due for a major correction. But it's not for the reason most people think. It's not because, it's not directly because of the polarization between the center right and the center left. It's not because of the changing morals and memes of our time. It's not even because every other civilization has fallen before us. There's one very easy reason that Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic nations are in trouble. And that's infrastructure. Let's take a look. So, as we are moving forward in time, you would think improved technology would be making things easier. We're not dealing with the batteries from the 1940s, the vacuum tubes from the 1950s. We have modern, efficient appliances. The problem is there's so much more people living in our system, and we're not expanding the infrastructure that we have. If you'll notice, almost nobody is building new power plants. Yes, they want to take us away from coal, oil, natural gas, all that sort of stuff. But nobody does anything about it. And we wind up stuck with the exact same stuff our ancestors were using because people simply don't want to put in the 10 to 20 years to build a power plant. That's just for your electricity. And we all go through brownouts and blackouts and other things that are extremely inconvenient and potentially life-threatening if you have home medical equipment and don't have a backup generator. Electricity is just the surface of our problems, though. It's clear and present, and since everybody has lights, everybody deals with it. There's more invisible structure out there, and the fact it's not being addressed is a crime. Let's look at the humble sewage system. Most people have pretty sturdy PVC pipes, weeping tile and stuff like that to keep their sewage flowing. Some people have clay sewage lines. Yes, clay. And clay was being used in the 60s and 70s when PVC had long since been mastered. As you can imagine, over the years, clay is not the most durable thing one might want. I mean, tree roots can get through it, certain animals can get through it, depending on how far down that your lines are attached. And that's for an individual residence. Imagine if it's downtown somewhere where there's major roadways all around it and you're in a 30-story apartment or condo or business complex, and they suddenly have to start ripping out sewer lines to replace them. Yeah, that's an undertaking, and it's stuff that you can't ignore. If you don't take care of sewage, it takes care of you. Or it fails to take care of you, depending on your perspective. Water lines. Flint, Michigan shows us that our water supply is very vulnerable at the best of times. But nobody scrambled forward with the money or the teams or even the know-how to bring them back from disaster. We've had a couple warnings in my recent life where they warned us to drink or filter the water because they were worried about a bacteria or a fungus or whatever the heck it was getting into the system. The response? Nothing. Government simply doesn't care. See, you have a right to clean water, but having a right to it doesn't mean you're actually going to get it. We'll go into that at one another time. Rights are a really funny thing. Not funny, haha, but funny, oh my gosh, what's going on here? They did a study back in the early 2000s, before 2010. And the idea was they were going to EMP proof the entire electrical grid for North America. That's Canada and the United States. The estimate came out to $1 billion. Now, initially you're saying, oh my God, that's a huge price, but think how many cities, think how many towns that you are putting this in for. And an EMP burst doesn't only come from nuclear war, it can come from the sun at any time. The Carrington event of, I believe, the 1870s showed us how devastating the sun can be. And we have had X-grade solar flares miss the planet by not much. Imagine if you're in a bad situation and somebody says, oh, here, we can make armor and put it on and it's going to help us out. And you're like, nah, I'm just going to count on being able to dodge everything that's coming my way. People would justifiably look at you like you were stupid. But the problem with that $1 billion outlay, it's not a very sexy project. It does create jobs. It makes life easier for most people and prepares us for a worst case situation. But no one's going to be able to tell who will be around when the ribbon cutting ceremony will be. And that's what politicians rely on. They're waiting to be the one that cuts that ribbon and gets all the people flocking around them so they can have their photo ops. There also wasn't a time restriction on that, and that's the other problem. Was this a 5-year project, a 10-year project, a 20-year project? And of course, with inflation, say that's going to be $2 billion. Well, the advantage that you have with the United States and Canada is you can fund this bilaterally. Once again, we have two different political systems, even though they're currently center-left. They could hammer this out pretty quickly. The United States has roughly 4 times the population Canada does, so they can decide who pays for it, how it integrates, what standard they're going to use. They could have this thing banged out and start working on it in very little time. They don't want to. Again, who's going to get the credit? 10, 15 years from now when it's all done. And the reason I'm saying 10, 15 years is because when you build anything, and I said this about the 45th President's Wall, is you got to get the work crews there. You got to get water and food down there. You got to get the machinery, the fuel, everything. And there's a lot of out-of-the-way locations. But it's easier to turn a blind eye and say, nah, it won't be a problem. We'll fix it if it comes up. That's great if it's you and your house and your sewer. Oh, we'll fix it if it comes up. But when it's a whole country, the situation is much more dire. We're still, okay, we treat the water a lot better than we did, but we're still basically dumping it back into the lakes and the oceans. Yeah, that's not healthy no matter who provides it. Yes, we are doing a much better job at treating it and conditioning it and making sure that the fish and animals aren't going to wind up dying, but when we pump it out, it's still warmer than the average water around it. Guess what? Fish get cold too, and if they find somewhere warm, they're going to grow there. Plants like it warm. So we're creating artificial ecosystems just because we don't want to put any extra steps in between us and getting rid of that water. Infrastructure. I know in Asia, from personal experience, they never developed very much in the way of landline of a landline grid. They do have it. In some areas it's very prominent, but most of the landlines have pretty much been discarded now in favor of cellular technology and, satellite broadband internet. We are still using the same two-wire system that Alexander Graham Bell first installed back in the 1900s and 1910s. Our grid is essentially 100 years behind them. The technology is there. We suffer what's called the last mile problem. I recently had a modem put in because the other one was getting old and they had a special, and you don't need to know the details of that. But I watched the technician put it in. He did a fine job, let me say. Filipino fella. He was having fun because my wife was Filipina, and they were having a grand time together. But what he mentioned is there was now the full fiber optic service in this area, and the next time I got my modem replaced, they would probably have to come in and lay the cable. So the line is there, but it was what's called the last mile problem. Getting it into the person's house, which is usually only about a mile away from whatever, the service box, the freshwater intake, whatever it is, that last mile is the most expensive problem. So we're going to spend this $1 billion on our infrastructure, probably more, and we'll still need to protect that last little bit coming into people's houses. We just had construction done in the area. Construction that was much needed, city construction. They put in new curbs and stuff like that. I believe I made a video complaining about it, but I deleted it because I thought I was being a little too critical. And yeah, well, it turns out Rogers was hugging the curb with their distribution lines. They just wrapped it around the curb because it was easier. That way you did the least amount of damage. And today the bill came due for Rogers. Well, not today, the past couple of weeks. And they are literally hanging wires from one place to another to try to get service from one house to another. They're dealing with a very minor outbreak of our own terribly lacking infrastructure. And it literally looks like Scotty on the Enterprise, where he's got everything jury-rigged and he's trying to rewire this into that to get it going, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. You've seen the episodes. And that's what's distressing. Rogers and Bell are two very large companies with very large budgets. And they have a mosquito impact idea where they're just, problems there, got it. Problem there, got it. And anybody with a car, okay, the air conditioner goes down, you can live without it. The tape deck goes down, you can live without it. The timing belt goes down, you can't live without it. And sooner or later, we're going to get to a timing belt or a junction box or one of the main sewer lines that was made out of clay and nobody looked at it. In New York City, they have what are basically sewer archaeologists, because those sewer lines can be up to 300 years old. They've been ripped up and rebuilt so many times, nobody knows what's down there. The same is true for our electrical infrastructure. Nobody knows really exactly every single connection. So the two solutions are to rip it all out and do it again, or just try to bypass part of it. We're bypassing. But like I said, some of our infrastructure is over 100 years old, whereas Asia and places like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait are building cities of the future where everything is brand new. Now here in North America, we have this plan where we just spread out from the cities. If you started your business in downtown Toronto, right now, Milton, Pickering, Barrie, they're offering you competitive rates to come and do business up there, and the infrastructure is newer. So instead of having a business in downtown Toronto with the prestige, you're willing to have a lesser prestige of Milton. No offense to anybody that lives in Milton. No offense to anybody that lives in Pickering. But by losing a bit of that prestige of having downtown Toronto as your business office, you're gaining loading docks that you can fit a 53-footer in. You're gaining water, electricity, all that you need. What's happening in the bigger cities, your New York, your Detroit, your Chicago, all that sort of place, they're just kind of letting those old buildings lie fallow. And it would be interesting to get an estimate to see how much it would cost to clean these businesses up, because a lot of them were businesses that were abandoned in the 60s and 70s, before we really had any environmental legislation worth a darn. So you're going to go to these sites, you're going to find PCBs, you're going to find asbestos, you're going to find all the scary things that have 10 million hazmat warnings and require you to go in with more gear than a stormtrooper, just so that you can go and try to get rid of this stuff. And then I don't know what you do with it. But that would be a definite solution. You'd probably never be able to clean it up so that people can live there permanently like an apartment. But you can probably clean it up to a point where it could be used industrially. Or at least begin the process of cleaning it up so that when the repair bill comes due, it's not all going to one person. But we don't care about that. As long as we have more land, we can go with Mike Harris. No, Mike Harris. There's a blast from the past. Ford. I always get the two Ford brothers mixed up. One's dead. I should really know the difference. But you can have his plan where you're going to go expand all over the Golden Horseshoe, rip down the green belt, which has been passionately defended for decades. But that doesn't matter now. We'll just take down the green belt, and we're going to put more businesses there that will probably have bigger problems in another 10, 20 years when we discover whatever technique that we use for making silicon, it turns out to be horrible. And it always does. New studies are coming out every single day about how horrible the things are that we're doing to our bodies. And this is where we are failing ourselves. We don't future-proof anything. We patch it up and hope it works well. And that's actually something the Western, educated, industrialized, rich democratic nations are good at. Patching things up. Band-aid here, twist of the wire here. We got to fix that, so we'll fix that part of it and we'll get to the rest another day. Almost every company I've worked for has had that attitude. They do plan for future-proofing certain systems. Like, it's always great to buy a new, sexy software system that's going to solve all the problems. But realistically, it's just a new way to do the same thing. In decades, I've seen one software upgrade that offered a magnitude greater capability than what was in before. And that's from home solutions to everything else. But software is easy. We can fix software with a couple guys and give them a weekend with pizza and Mountain Dew, and they'll fix almost anything. It's incredible. It doesn't involve the investment of bringing in a crew, bringing in heavy machinery, bringing in fuel, food, and resources for that crew. And I confess that it's a big investment. But like I said, we're 100 years behind the times already, and we're sinking further back every single day. Just like they say, we're not getting younger, our infrastructure is not getting younger. And it's time we stop neglecting it. These are not the glamorous deals. These are not, these are not the situations where you get people coming out and shaking hands and, lording over their fat bellies at a local banquet hall so that way they can celebrate their accomplishment. No, that's not what's happening. But what is happening is people's lives, careers, and very existence is at stake. And it's time we take that seriously. Basically put, we need to seriously invest in our infrastructure, because if we don't, it's going to break down, and this piecemeal approach is not going to help anyone. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to click the link down in the comments to buy one of our books. It really helps the show. and we hope you have a fantastic day.